I was 22 when Clara humiliated me at graduation. While others clapped politely, she leaned over to my mother and whispered, loud enough for the row behind us to hear, "All that money for a degree in coloring books." They both laughed. I stood on stage with a forced smile and a heart cracking in silence. 10 years later, the echo of that insult still hung in my gallery like a ghost. Florence had become home. My paintings lined marble halls. Critics quoted my name. Yet that old wound never quite healed. Until one rainy afternoon, it reopened with a knock at my studio door. I didn't recognize her at first. Clara had lost the glossy confidence. She was soaked, breathless, eyes wide with something between fear and desperation. She stood beneath my framed mural of St. Lucia, trembling. "Raina," she said, her voice cracking. "I need your help." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "With what?" "Choosing wall colors." She flinched. "I deserve that." She told me everything in fragments, like a broken window spilling sharp light. She worked with a private cultural foundation now, the Amaro Trust. One of their commissioned murals, a 14th-century recreation for a diplomatic villa, had been found to contain forged layers beneath the paint. She claimed she didn't know that someone else had altered the work, and now she was facing charges of art fraud across 3 countries. I raised my eyebrows. "And you thought what? The cousin with the coloring book degree could fix it?" She stepped closer. "They want me to restore it. Publicly. But I can't. I need you to do it. Quietly. Before the inspection next month." "And if I say no?" "They'll press charges. And worse. These people aren't just bureaucrats. They're connected." She was pale, shaking. Her hands clutched a rolled-up canvas. I didn't want to take it. I wanted to close the door. But something in her eyes, regret, maybe, or fear, made me pause. "Let me see it," I said. She unrolled the canvas with trembling hands. The painting was beautiful. Too beautiful. Intricate gold leaf. Layers of ultramarine. But something was wrong. My fingers brushed a corner, and I saw it, a faint outline beneath the surface. A symbol. Latin script. Buried history. "You weren't just set up, Clara." My voice dropped. "Someone hid something in here. And they didn't want anyone to find it." The studio lights flickered. Outside, thunder growled across the rooftops of Florence. And that was how it began. Clara stayed the night in my studio, curled on the old velvet couch beneath my sketches of Roman ruins. She barely slept. I could hear her pacing around midnight, mumbling to herself in anxious bursts. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. At dawn, I stood before the mural canvas again. The faint Latin inscription teased me from beneath the paint like a whisper through centuries. I took a magnifying glass and examined it further. It wasn't just one phrase. It was a sequence. A map. Or perhaps, a warning. I brewed black coffee and slid a cup toward Clara, who sat with her knees drawn to her chest. "Did you ever think about what you were helping them paint?" I asked. "This isn't just art. It's a cover." Clara looked hollow. "I didn't know. I was just a liaison. I arranged funding, permits. The artist was someone they hired from Spain. He disappeared 2 weeks ago." "Disappeared how?" "Vanished. No messages. His studio was cleared out overnight. No trace." I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the morning chill. Art disappearing was never about the painting. It was about the story it threatened to reveal. We drove that afternoon to the villa where the mural had been installed. A pale building with high archways and no signage. Government silence wrapped around it like ivy. Inside, 2 guards led us through echoing halls to a sunlit room where the original mural was mounted. An imposing recreation of a martyr's vision. It was stunning. But wrong. "The pigment is fresh," I murmured. "But the iconography, it's older than it should be." Clara nodded. "The trust said it was a symbolic tribute to historical technique." "But that phrase you found? It's not symbolic." I checked. It's a direct quote from an apocryphal letter written during the Council of Florence. "Meaning?" She swallowed. "Meaning it references a relic that supposedly disappeared during the plague years. One rumored to grant power to whomever possessed it." I stared at her. "You think this mural is pointing to that?" I don't know what to think anymore. Back at my studio, I began carefully testing the paint layers on a corner of the canvas she brought. What I uncovered underneath chilled me. A hidden image, faint but clear, an Ouroboros. A snake eating its own tail. Ancient. Symbolic. Dangerous. Then came the sound. A slow, deliberate knock at the studio door. I froze. Clara's eyes widened. We're not expecting anyone. I stepped forward, heartbeat rising. When I opened the door, no one stood there. Just a single envelope on the ground. I picked it up, turned it over. No return address. No name. Inside, a single sentence written in red ink. Stop digging. Or we'll bury you next. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on my desk like a bomb waiting to go off. I studied the handwriting. Angular. Rushed. The kind of script someone writes when they want to appear calm but their hand is shaking. Clara hovered behind me, wrapped in a shawl. You think they're watching us? I nodded slowly. I think they've been watching for a while. We needed more information. Not guesses, not hunches. Facts. So we went to the only person in Florence who had experience dealing with stolen artifacts and forged restorations. Professor Elio Marchetti. He once taught art history at the University of Bologna but now ran a quiet antique shop near the Arno. Elio's shop smelled of cedarwood and old books. He was hunched, gray-haired, eyes shot beneath horn-rimmed glasses. I've seen that mark before, he muttered, examining the photo I'd taken of the Ouroboros under the mural layers. But not in a museum. In a letter. He limped to the back, returned with a brittle document wrapped in silk. It was a copy of a 15th-century letter written by a monk who claimed to have hidden a sacred fragment during the plague. The letter mentioned a painting, a guardian, and a promise of destruction if the secret was misused. Clara leaned in. Do you think this fragment is inside the mural? Elio hesitated. If it is, the mural isn't just dangerous because of what it depicts. It may be dangerous because of what it holds. Literally. That was when we noticed the man across the street. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't walking. He just stood, facing the shop window, staring through the reflection. Sunglasses. Earpiece. No expression. When we stepped outside, he turned and walked away. We're being followed, Clara whispered. I didn't disagree. Back at the studio, I retrieved the special infrared lamp I used for restoration analysis. I needed to see every inch of the canvas clearly. As I scanned the layers, a new image bloomed beneath the paint. Barely visible, yet unmistakable. A figure in red robes. Hooded. Holding a silver box. It wasn't just symbolic. It was a map to something real. But then the lamp flickered. And the power went out. Darkness. Clara gasped behind me. I turned, heart racing. And that's when the windows shattered. Glass sprayed across the floor like scattered ice. Clara screamed. I grabbed her arm and pulled her behind the heavy easel. Shadows moved outside. Quick. Trained, not random thugs. Whoever wanted the mural silenced had resources. We waited, breath held, until the footsteps faded. When I finally crept out and flicked on the emergency lights, the studio was wrecked. The canvas had been slashed down the center. But something strange happened. The cut exposed more than paint. Embedded in the frame, hidden behind layers of wood and canvas, was a small compartment. Inside it, wrapped in faded cloth, sat a silver box. Real. Ornate. Cold to the touch. Clara stared. That's it. I nodded slowly. This was never about the art. It was about hiding this. The box had engravings matching those in Elio's letter. I examined it closely. No lock, but intricate grooves and patterns spiraled across its surface. I didn't dare open it. Not yet. Instead, we returned to Elio's shop with the artifact sealed in a linen bag. He turned pale the moment he saw it. This hasn't been seen for centuries, he whispered. The Custodia Ardentis. It was thought to have been destroyed. What's inside? Clara asked. No one knows. Legend says it contains the ashes of something not meant to survive, something from before Florence. A relic of power. It cursed whoever tried to possess it without a worthy purpose. I frowned. That explains the threats. And the fake mural. Elio looked grim. You need to destroy it. Now. But as he spoke, I noticed his hands trembling. Not with fear but desire. He wanted the box. He wanted whatever was inside. I pulled Clara aside. He's not safe. We left quickly, only to find the tires on my car had been slashed. We had no time to waste. So we ran, through alleyways, through the city's back streets, until we reached an old gallery I used to exhibit in, long abandoned now. We barricaded ourselves inside. Clara held the silver box, staring at it like it might explode. What do we do? I looked at the artifact. Then at the coded sketches still rolled in my bag. Then I realized there was a second part to the inscription. Something I hadn't translated. I unrolled it. Under the faint Latin words I saw it. A date. A time. A location. And the words, return or be taken. Morning arrived gray and cold, casting a muted light across the broken tiles of the old gallery floor. Clara and I hadn't slept. We'd taken turns keeping watch, the silver box cradled between us like some sacred curse neither of us wanted to claim. I unfolded the parchment once more. The date written was today. The time, noon. The location, San Giusto Abbey, abandoned for nearly a century after an earthquake split its foundation. I knew it vaguely, a relic of a different Florence, long swallowed by silence and decay. We're really doing this? Clara asked as we emerged into the chilled streets. I nodded. If we don't, someone else will. And they might not be as careful. We took back streets and trams, avoiding cameras, staying off main roads. Florence suddenly felt less like home and more like a trap designed to herd us somewhere we didn't want to go. When we arrived at the Abbey, the sky was choked with clouds. The place was in ruin. Ivy strangled what was left of the stone bell tower, and rusted scaffolding clung to the collapsed southern wall. We slipped through a crack in the archway and descended into the nave. As we passed cracked pillars and shattered pews, Clara froze. Did you hear that? I did. A footstep. Then another. We ducked behind a collapsed altar. Peering through a gap in the stone, I saw two figures enter, dressed in black. Silent. Armed. Clara's voice was a whisper. They followed us. We moved, carefully, to the right transept where the wall had partially caved in. Behind the rubble was a spiral staircase, barely visible. We climbed down into the crypt. There, the air was damp and still. The deeper we went, the more I felt it, the weight of time pressing against the walls. The path led to a chamber, circular and carved into solid rock, where ancient Latin script danced across the stone like firelight. In the center stood a pedestal. And on the pedestal, a hollow groove that matched the dimensions of the silver box. I looked at Clara. She nodded, though her hands trembled. I placed the box onto the pedestal. Nothing happened. Then, a grinding sound. A panel in the floor slid open. Beneath it, a second chamber. Smaller. Darker. I climbed down first, torchlight flickering across the walls. They were lined with frescoes. Old, primal images of fire, war, gods, and ruin. At the end of the room stood a statue, a robed figure with no face, arms outstretched, as though offering judgment. In its hands, a second artifact. A small disc, like an ancient seal. I reached for it. And that's when I heard it. Stone scraping above. Clara screamed. The two men in black had found us. The chamber filled with echoes, shouts, gunmetal clatters, Clara's panicked footsteps above. I shoved the ancient disc into my satchel and darted toward the far wall, searching for anything, a crack, a gap, a forgotten exit. Stone, cold and ancient, offered nothing but silence. Then I remembered the inscription I had copied in my sketchbook, the part one hadn't translated until yesterday. It wasn't just a threat. It was a map. I flipped open the notebook with shaking fingers, comparing the carvings around the statue to my sketch. Symbols. Arrows. One curved toward a sun motif etched near the floor. I pressed it. A low rumble trembled beneath my feet. Behind the statue, a panel of stone receded into the wall. A hidden passage. Clara! I shouted, my voice echoing up the shaft. Down here! Hurry! I heard her cry out, then boots clattering on the metal ladder. She descended fast, cheeks flushed and eyes wild. They're coming, she gasped. They have silencers. We ducked into the newly revealed tunnel just as the men entered the chamber above. I heard one curse in Italian. Then a shot rang out. Metal striking stone. Sparks fell like stars behind us as we fled into darkness. The tunnel narrowed as we descended deeper beneath the city. The air was warm now, humid, carrying the scent of ancient water and rusted iron. Ahead, a faint red glow pulsed like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Clara whispered. "I don't know. But we're going toward it." The path ended at a chamber unlike any we'd seen before. It was circular, domed, and humming with a low mechanical vibration. Carved into the center of the floor was a mechanism. Concentric circles of metal and stone, inscribed with languages I didn't recognize. And in the middle, an empty socket shaped exactly like the disc I carried. "I think this was what the box was protecting," I said quietly. Clara stood beside me, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "What happens if you place it?" I hesitated. "I think it activates something. Maybe a lock. Or maybe a curse." Behind us, we heard voices again. Closer this time. The passage was no longer safe. I knelt and slowly placed the disc into the center of the socket. Click. The floor shook. Light flared from the engravings in a fiery pulse. Then silence. No doors opened. No walls shifted. Then we heard it. A grinding scream of stone far above, echoing down the tunnel like thunder. Clara turned to me, eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I don't know." We sprinted back toward the tunnel's mouth, but heat began to rise behind us. Not fire. Something older. Deeper. Like the earth itself was waking. When we emerged back into the crypt, the men in black were gone. Only one remained, slumped against the wall, unmoving. A scorched mark sizzled on the ground beside him. Clara backed away. "He's dead." Something got him. I looked around, heartbeat pounding. Then I noticed, the silver box was gone. Taken. By someone else. We stood in silence, staring at the scorch mark and the lifeless man against the wall. My fingers twitched with adrenaline. I wanted to believe he had fallen during the chaos, a casualty of the collapsing chamber. But the smell of burnt flesh, the precise sear on the stone, it told a different story. Clara stepped back further. "Someone's still here." She was right. No blood trail. No sign of retreat. Whoever had taken the silver box knew these tunnels. Maybe even built them. That thought alone made my skin crawl. "We need to get out," I said. "And we need to go deep." "Deeper?" she asked, incredulous. "Yes," I whispered, eyes on the disc that still glowed faintly in the floor socket. "Whatever we activated, it's only the beginning." We turned away from the body and headed further into the tunnel system, past the strange chamber and its circling scripts. The vibration in the air had grown stronger now, as though the city above were holding its breath. After 10 minutes, we found another split. One path sloping up, another winding down into blackness. "We go down," I said, barely able to hear my own voice over the rising hum. The descent felt endless. The walls turned from carved stone to something older. Natural rock, porous and lined with mineral veins that sparkled in our torchlight. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast underground vault, shaped like a dome, far below anything Florence should have held. The ceiling shimmered with embedded crystals. In the center stood a strange apparatus, 12 spokes extending outward from a bronze platform, all pointing to mural panels arranged in a ring. The murals depicted scenes, plagues, wars, floods, cities crumbling. But they weren't from the past. They were from the future. Clara's voice broke the silence. This is prophecy." "No," I corrected, running a hand along the bronze. "This is control." Before she could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber. "I had hoped you'd come further." We spun around. A man stood just beyond the archway. He was tall, wearing a pale linen suit, completely out of place in the filthy stone chamber. His voice was calm. British. Educated. "You're the one who took the box," I said. He smiled slightly. "Not took. Retrieved. It was never yours to begin with." Clara moved closer to me, tense. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. "You may call me Aldrich. And I've waited a long time for someone with your instincts." He stepped forward slowly, hands visible. This place, he said, gesturing to the murals, was once a failsafe. A system built by those who understood what was coming. Not just war or ruin, but collapse. Civilization, unraveled from within. I watched him carefully. Why show us? Because I believe you can finish what your father started. The name hit me like a punch. Clara's head snapped toward me. What? Aldrich nodded. He found this vault 30 years ago. But he was afraid. He locked it behind symbols and riddles. And he left it for someone who could understand its weight. You're lying, I snapped. My father was a restorer. A historian. And what is history? Aldrich said gently. If not the architecture of tomorrow? The chamber around us began to hum louder. Light pulsed from beneath the bronze platform. Aldrich smiled again. More grim now. Your time is short. I can help. But only if you trust me. I didn't know whether to scream or run. My mind reeled with Aldrich's words. My father's secret, the murals of disaster, and now this vault that pulsed with energy like a sleeping god ready to wake. And somehow, I was meant to finish it? Clara spoke first, steady but low. You knew his father. What do you want from us? Aldrich's eyes gleamed. Not want. Need. He moved toward the bronze platform in the center. The ground beneath it vibrated subtly now, like a breath being held by the earth. Your father built the failsafe, Aldrich said. But he never activated it. He feared the consequences. Clara crossed her arms. What does it do? It predicts, prevents, corrects. It is a compass for civilization. And it can influence what must fall or rise. I stepped forward. You're talking about controlling history. Not control, he said, smiling gently. Correction. This machine doesn't rule. It reveals. And you, unlike your father, have no allegiance to a crumbling world order. His words burned with quiet menace. He pulled a key from his coat. Old, copper, etched with familiar script. It matched the designs we'd seen on the chamber ceiling. With great ceremony, he fitted it into the core of the mechanism. It's not active, he said. Because the system needs 2 keys. Yours is the second. He gestured to the small silver box Clara had managed to recover before the chamber above collapsed. You've already carried it all this way. I trust you've read it. I nodded. I had read it. Diagrams. Codes. And a story. My father's story. A confession and a warning wrapped in history. Once both keys are turned, Aldrich continued, a decision must be made. One timeline continues. The other ends. Ends. Clara repeated. You mean like entire cities? Entire futures, Aldrich said simply. The platform glowed. My hands trembled. What happens if we don't turn it? I asked. Then everything your father feared comes to pass. War. Collapse. The mechanisms of corruption run unchecked. But you don't want balance, I said sharply. You want control. That's why you've waited. For someone desperate enough to pull the lever. Aldrich's smile faded. You're not wrong. But that doesn't make me incorrect. I looked to Clara. Her face was pale, but her eyes were locked on mine. Whatever choice you make, she said, I'll follow it. That was the moment I realized. I had already made my choice. I stepped forward and placed the silver key into the panel beside Aldrich's. You sure? He asked, voice low. No, I replied. But I trust the man who tried to bury this, not the one trying to dig it up. And I turned the key. The mechanism came to life with a deafening hum. Light shot across the platform, into the murals, into the ceiling. For a second, the chamber filled with sound. A sound like distant thunder and rushing wind and voices. Hundreds of voices whispering at once. Aldrich's face changed. Horror. Realization. You chose stasis, he hissed. You chose delay. I chose not to rewrite the world in your image. The ground shuddered violently. Cracks split through the murals, which bled with golden light. Aldrich ran to the panel, trying to reverse the key. But it was too late. A shock wave erupted from the core, and then silence. When I woke, the chamber was collapsed in darkness. Clara beside me. Blood on my temple. No sign of Aldrich. And in my hand, the silver key, cracked down the center.